themselves, reskilling themselves. At the moment, the only options are that you are allowed to study for 21 hours if it doesn't infringe on your benefits, and that is becoming nigh on impossible, because if you'd like to continue your course, you'd like to get the qualification, you're not considered to be open and willing for work, and therefore you have to actually leave that course. Now, for somebody on the dole that's trying to better themselves, that seems like another hurdle to stop them and keep them on the bottom rung of society.
Right, and what... Before we hear from the politicians, let's just hear from our questioner, Ian Newbury, about his view and who of these two he agrees with.
Well, the gentleman talked about the Germans. The Germans invest more in practical skills than academic. This is what we need. Therefore, you could use the older generation, I coin a phrase, to train these people. They have the skills to train the youngsters. Could not some of the older generation be employed in this way?
Gillian Shepherd.
Well, I agree with Lorna, and indeed our questioner, that unemployment is tremendously difficult for the people affected, and it is an extremely difficult experience for people to have, and it's very difficult for their families as well. It clearly is a problem that we share with our European neighbours and with other countries in the world, the other industrialised nations, as Mr Newbury will know as an engineer. It's because we're in recession, there is a world recession, and there are rising unemployment rates across the industrialised world. Now, some of the measures that were included by the Chancellor in the autumn statement were especially designed to help with job creation. Particular attention was paid to the maintenance of capital programmes. There's further encouragement for exports. There's increased capital allowances for manufacturing. Again, probably things that Mr Newbury would welcome. But what I would like to say, because his question is specifically about training, is this. I think that the continuing dedication of employers to the importance of training is a particularly bright spot at this difficult time. Employers continue to invest almost as much in training their workforce as they did in the boom years in the late 1980s, because employers feel that not only is a dedication to training one way of continuing to keep productivity up and profits up, but also if they dedicate a lot of attention to training, then their companies will benefit from the recovery when it comes, and industry is devoting something like 20 billion to training at the moment. As far as the government is concerned, we actually had a real increase in my own department's budget to finance training, which is delivered by exactly the sort of partnership that Tim Waterstone mentioned between government and industry through training and enterprise councils. But what is also important, of course, is to have the right education framework, to have national examinations, a national curriculum, an attention to technology again, which will please and interest, I think, Mr Newbury, and, of course, continuing training through the youth training programme. Now, the very last thing I'm going to say, because others want to get in on this, obviously, is that mention has been made of Germany. And I think that the major difference between ourselves and Germany is that in Germany there is a real respect for vocational training. And I wish that I thought we had that same respect in this country. It is coming, and I'm encouraging that respect to grow for all that I'm worth. But people need to realise that to be an engineer is just as important to the wealth of the nation as to be a journalist or a banker. And we need real respect for vocational training in the same way that the Germans have it, and then I believe we can begin to be really competitive with them.
Thank you very much. Joan Ruddock.
Well, I have to say to Julian that one of the saddest post bags I ever get is from young people who want to do vocational training who cannot get a discretionary grant. And it's your government that has actually made such cuts in the education budgets on local authorities and has prevented hundreds of thousands of young people who would willingly go and train vocationally and who know what they want to do in life, who have opportunities availed to them by their local colleges and can't actually get the financial support to make it possible. And as our questioner said, older people could be teaching younger people skills. They used to do that. We had industrial apprenticeships. And where have all of them gone? The problem in this country is that we just have not invested appropriately in training. We've made cuts in so many areas where people are willing and eager to learn and to acquire skills, but they have not been allowed to because the programs have been taken away. And the other side of the coin is, of course, that the government has repeatedly, through its privatisation programmes, with billions in sweeteners, actually squandered this nation's finances in ideological ways, which Thatcher brought to this country and perpetrated so that we had sell-offs, sweeteners, and a whole era regarded making money easily as being the most important and creative thing that they could do. We've lost our manufacturing industry, and nothing the government has been doing in its recent programmes, or indeed in the most recent statement, has given us back the opportunity to encourage investment to create real and meaningful jobs. And on top of that, the government has actually done away with jobs. You've only got to look at the question of closing down the pits and putting what would amount to 100,000 people out of work in that way. You've only got to look at local authority cuts. We've lost nearly 7,000 teachers in the last year, and that will go on and will go on and will go on, because this government has got a mentality and an ideology that I'm afraid is not in tune with what people need in terms of training, opportunities, the acquisition of skills, and the application of those skills in real and meaningful jobs. And until that changes, we will not get the unemployment levels down, no matter what the training programs. Right. And I think it's important to remember that if they hadn't changed the rules, then we would be actually having to acknowledge there are 4 million unemployed in Britain today.
No, I'll come to you in a moment. Let's just hear one or two views. This gentleman on the front row here.
I want to wholeheartedly agree with what Joan Ruddock has just been saying. It came from her heart. If I was a Conservative in this government, the government we've got now, I couldn't sleep peacefully at night. Gillian Shepherd talks glibly about all these things in the heads as the gentleman did alongside her, and it doesn't mean a thing. It just washes off her back, the same as the government.
Secretary of State.
Well, I just wanted to take issue with some of the points that Joan made. I mean, it was a fine speech,
but his point is where is the hope for the unemployed? You talk about job creation, but the projections see the unemployment figures rising for the next year or next 2 years.
We don't actually forecast rises in unemployment or indeed future unemployment figures.
But no one is projecting the figure to come down.
That unemployment lags the recovery. Will come. The recovery has already started in the United States.
Can I speak? Let me put in now.
Of course, yes.
But this started before your so-called slump. It started under the glorious years of Thatcher and filling the pockets of our rich friends. That's when it started, not the slump. Don't keep blaming this to yourself.
You've had your say now. Let the Minister have hers.
Perhaps I could just say to you that during the years which you so sneeringly describe as the Thatcher years, we had the greatest job creation in any OECD country. We had a creation of more than 3 million jobs in those years. And now perhaps I might return to Joan.
Right.
Joan made a fine speech, but it flies in the face of the facts. She ignores the fact that at the beginning of the decade, 1 in 8 of young people went into higher education. Now 1 in 4 go in, and there will be 1 in 3 going in by the year 2000.
Gillian, and not
she ignores the fact that we are actually funding a 20% increase